Typhoon Nul is expected to make landfall within a few hours, bringing with it torrential rain and wind speeds of up to 160 kilometres an hour.
In Norman, Oklahoma, hail and wind at times caused near blinding conditions. Baseball-sized pellets even knocked out windows at a YMCA building. Crews worked overnight clearing broken glass. Part of the building also flooded during the storm.
Despite the destruction, Nul also brought much-needed precipitation to rice and corn farms that had been hit by prolonged, intense heat.
Heavy rain caused bigger problems Friday evening, creating flash flooding. Several inches of rain fell in a matter of hours in some areas where the ground is already saturated from storms earlier in the week.
An ominous sky broke into tornadoes Wednesday night. Multiple twisters tore through 4 states in the southern Great Plains, ravaging homes, snapping trees, downing power lines.
Mike, it's getting big. I got trees coming down on me and power flashes. I gotta back out of here.
The National Weather Service reports at least 48 tornadoes touched down throughout parts of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska, even heading out of rural areas to just south of downtown Oklahoma City, a town of 500,000.
It's really cranking down, Mike.
Travelers at the Will Rogers Airport in Oklahoma City were evacuated into a pedestrian tunnel for hours. The local hospital lost power and had to resort to emergency generators to stay operational. But it's an RV park just south of the Oklahoma metro area that took a direct hit, injuring 30, killing 1.
This has been my life for 27 years, and it's I can't describe it. I think I'm a little bit in shock. When I first saw it, I just couldn't believe it. It's just the devastation, you know. It's just, you kind of wonder how you're going to recover from this, but we will.
In Lincoln, Kansas, another tornado flipped cars and scattered debris.
We have a large multiple vortex tornado on the ground here south of Lincoln, Kansas. If you are in Lincoln, Kansas or on Highway 14, you need to take shelter immediately. This is a large tornado which is continuing to grow in size.
By this morning, the storm winds had died down, but residents in parts of Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska had to deal with torrential downpours. Some 7 inches fell in parts of Oklahoma City in just a matter of hours, and flash flood warnings were declared.
Let's bring in Major Sean Cross, who I think joins us from Skype. Good morning, Major. Thanks for joining us. You are a pilot with the Hurricane Hunters. I'm sure you probably didn't think in February you'd be flying a mission in May, but you guys will be, certainly. And tell us what it's like, actually, since you're a pilot, and I was just talking to Michael about this, to go from 23,000 feet down into the 1,500-foot level, probably more impressive when there's convection around a center versus it being dry, right?
That's correct, Jim. And just to say, yeah, we are a little surprised that we have a storm this early in the season, but we're ready to go for it 100%. But coming down from altitude down to a flight level of anywhere from 1,500 as low as 500 feet above the surface. Wow. It's just a normal descent like you would experience in any airliner, like if you're going into Atlanta, for example. We are watching out for the weather. We're watching our radar and stuff like that. We are avoiding some of the more turbulent stuff out there, any of the really heavy convection that we can, until we get right into the storm environment itself, and then it's pretty much all bets are off. And we're, if we have to punch through the heavy stuff to find the data and get it to the National Hurricane Center, that's what we do.
So, viewers at home are like, how do they fly into a hurricane? How do you fly through the core of thunderstorms when most airplanes commercially do everything they can to avoid them?
Yeah, we get that question a lot, and people, they're curious about the wind field itself. What's it like to fly in 120-mile-an-hour winds? Well, that's when you're on an airliner, you're doing pretty much the same thing when you're up at altitude in 30 to 40,000 feet. You're in that jet stream, so the winds are really intense up there. But what we experience down at 10,000 feet or 5,000 feet, if we're in the eye of a hurricane, the wind field is different. We're actually flying sort of sideways in what we call a crab, but it's the convection that we're experiencing down at that low altitude. That's where we get our we call our best ride. That's
right.
what happens. And it's not uncommon to look out at the wingtips, and the wingtips are flexing, going up and down. And I find myself saying many times, come on, baby, hold on, just get me through a couple minutes.
Wow.
Major Cross, really quickly, is this like a standard mission? Are you going to be dropping 8-10 sondes along the way?
It is. It's a standard mission for us. This is a low-level invest, so they'll probably drop a sonde, depending on what the National Hurricane Center is requesting, as far as what the wind field is to the southernmost point of the environment. Once they get in at 500 feet to 1,500, depending on what the request is by the NHC, they really won't be dropping any sondes from that flight level. They'll be more interested in using SMRF data and what exactly is going on at the surface. And they're going to kind of break that whole quadrant up into 4 areas. It's going to be kind of sort of like a big X, and they're going to fly around in each area to see if they have closed circulation. If they do, at that point, then what they'll say is they've closed a storm off, and then they'll go up into more of a fixed mission. But we'll see what's going to
happen. We've got 15 seconds left. Are you scheduled for this invest at all?
I was scheduled to fly yesterday on the first mission out of the season, and that one canceled, unfortunately, for us.
You're ready to go, though. Thank you. Major Sean Cross, not expecting, certainly, to go out in May, but the atmosphere has a different plan.
The official hurricane season is nearly a month away, but the first named storm of the year is already developing. The system named Anna has led to tropical storm watches in parts of the Carolinas. It will create a wet weekend for some areas of the East Coast.
At the same time, the plains are under another threat of violent weather. An apparent lightning strike caused a gas well to explode last night outside Dallas. Adriana Diaz is in Bridge Creek, Oklahoma, where the rush to cleanup is underway before more severe storms develop. Adriana, good morning.
Good morning. With more storms looming, residents here in Bridge Creek, Oklahoma are trying to clean up after a massive tornado and heavy rains ripped apart this garage, destroyed 1,500 homes, and killed 1 woman. Yesterday, storms made their way across Texas, where a lightning strike is expected to be the cause of a massive fire. Flames burned out of control.
Oh my God, a fire.
And lit up the sky.
This is an explosion, and the gas well is burning behind these houses.
After an apparent lightning strike hit a Dallas area gas well Thursday night.
All right. This one means business.
Violent weather brought tornadoes and dangerous flooding to Texas. Pickups struggled alongside police trucks to navigate the mess. Here in nearby Oklahoma, people are cleaning up from Wednesday's tornado.
We lost everything. Got nothing.
Drone footage captured the extensive damage from this southern Oklahoma City RV park.
We had water probably at least about 6 inches deep running through this entire area.
Keith Bryant, the chief of the Oklahoma City Fire Department, gave us a closer look.
In addition to this area right here, citywide, we responded to about 150 water rescues.
Hundreds of homes were damaged in Bridge Creek. Susan Blethrow and her daughter Tina say resilience is the Oklahoma standard.
You just keep going. You just clean up and keep moving on.
Mark Crick agrees. He says it's just stuff that can be replaced. But for him, this American flag was worth saving.
There'll be people from all over the United States just pour in here to help us. And we can count on it. There's no doubt they'll be here. I've seen it over and over.
The Red Cross and Salvation Army are here handing out food and helping with shelter. But just when residents here need a break, they now have to prepare for more extreme weather expected this weekend. Gail?
That's the last thing they need to see or hear. Thank you, Adriana.
High voltage and natural gas are a volatile mix. A lightning strike is being blamed for this massive explosion in Denton, Texas. Investigators say it struck a natural gas well Thursday night, sparking this huge blast. The fireball could be seen for miles, causing panic on social media from people who live nearby.
Hey, should we call the police?
Fortunately, no one was hurt. Severe weather was in the area at the time. I'm Matt Sampson, The Weather Channel.
Oh my God.
Just crashed on the highway in front of us.
The crash of the single-engine plane on the busy I-285 north of Atlanta came just as rush hour was ending. Hundreds of people witnessed its horror.
No, a plane crash!
The just-fueled plane slammed into a cement median and burst into flames, sending thick black smoke into the air. All 4 people on board were killed.
Did you see it? You didn't see it? I saw it coming.
The Piper 32 had taken off moments before from DeKalb Peachtree County Airport about a mile away. Witnesses say it showed signs of trouble while still in the air.
The first thing I noticed was the plane flying extremely low, almost hitting the red light to come on to 285. And as I turned to get on the 285, was just a large plume of black smoke.
Drivers swerved and braked to avoid the disaster. Gerald Smith's semi was one of 2 vehicles hit by debris.
If I would have stayed on the gas, I would have met it head on, and it probably would have killed me.
Fortunately, no one on the ground was hurt.
It is quite remarkable, considering the fact 285 around that time in the morning, that it was not any more tragic than what it already is.
Authorities say those killed in the plane include the pilot, 53-year-old Greg Bird, his 2 sons, 27-year-old Christopher and 25-year-old Philip, and Christopher's fiancee, Jackie Colzer. The 4 were headed to the University of Mississippi for graduation ceremonies this weekend. The small plane had no black box recorders.
I'm going to look at the maintenance that was last done on the aircraft. From what we understand, the airplane just fueled at over at Peachtree DeKalb, and also we're going to look at the pilot's experience.
I-285 reopened Friday afternoon, but the scars of the tragedy remain, both on the highway and in the minds of the many who saw it.
Tonight, Ebola in an American's eye. An American who had been given a clean bill of health after being hit with Ebola suddenly was in great pain. He found out the Ebola was still alive and in his eye. Here's what we know. Dr. Ian Crozier was hospitalized in Atlanta in September with Ebola. In October, he got that clean bill of health. He was back out in public living his normal life. And then 2 months later, he was back in the hospital. His left eye was in great pain. His iris had turned from this blue that you see here to green, and as you can see, the pupil had dilated incredibly, so you could barely even see the ring around it. And tests showed that while his blood was declared Ebola-free, his eye, that eye, was still full of the virus. Our chief medical correspondent, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, is out front. Sanjay, this is a bizarre story. It's a frightening story. I guess the first question is, he gets this clean bill of health. 2 months later, the Ebola's in his eye. How was it able to survive? And was it alive the whole time in his eye? Did it migrate there? I mean, what do you know?
Most likely it had been in his eye all along. The interesting thing about the eye, along with a few other parts of the body, is that they're sort of immune privileged, meaning that immune cells, the cells that fight infections, have a hard time getting to certain places. They can get there, but in much smaller amounts. So Ebola, the virus, or it could have been any virus or pathogen, if it gets in the eye, sometimes the body has a harder time clearing it. That can happen in certain parts of the brain as well, in your cartilage. So likely, Aaron, he had that infection from the beginning. It's not in his blood anymore, which is what gave him that clean bill of health that you mentioned. But because he started having these symptoms, they actually put a needle into his eye, and when they pulled back some of the fluid, they found the Ebola virus in that fluid.
So you're talking about places in the body. I mean, this is incredible that it's hard for immune cells to get to. Things can survive in. You mentioned cartilage, parts of the brain, the eye. I mean, when this doctor, you know, and as this country was told, this doctor was healthy, back public, no longer contagious. Obviously, they didn't know or expect that the virus would be in his eye, but it was. I mean, how can they know that he wasn't a risk to others around him if the Ebola was still there?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you know, it's a question that we put directly to the doctors who did this procedure, who put the needle into his eye, because they were the ones who obviously had the most contact. I should mention, first of all, that we've known about the possibility of Ebola lingering in the eye for some time. Even back in the outbreak of 1995 in Africa, there were some patients who subsequently were found to have the virus in their eye even a couple of months after they were declared Ebola free. So it wasn't entirely new. But what these doctors did was interesting. They around the tear duct, they took some of the tears and some of that area and looked for the Ebola virus first before they did the tap. And they did not find any Ebola virus there. After they did the tap, they did find the Ebola in the eye itself, but after that, they looked at the tears again, and they didn't find any Ebola. So they're very confident that he's not contagious, that he's not spreading this virus to other people. So that, you know, that from a public health standpoint, that was really important.
Very important. Now, his iris, as we saw, went from blue to green, and obviously the pupil dilated significantly, right? It was almost as if you'd gone to the eye doctor, right? It became all black, and then just that little green. So that's the normal, and then that's what happened to his eye. Why would that happen?
You know, it's interesting. We asked the ophthalmologist this, and they say it's a bit of a medical mystery. You know, it's interesting, Aaron, you'll appreciate this because you have blue eyes, but you may know that blue eyes, basically, you don't have any pigment, any melanin in the eye. So when light is shining into your eye, it just refracts, it disperses, and that's what gives it the blue color. People who have darker eyes, like me, for example, you have a lot more melanin. Could it have been the virus itself you know, causing some of that pigmentation of his eye, and then when the virus cleared, his eye started to go back to a more normal color. Typically, what we hear is that this does happen, where the eye changes color like this, it usually stays that way. In his case, it went back to its normal color. It could be some indication that the amount of Ebola virus has gone down. But it is kind of remarkable to look at those pictures.
It is, as you say, a medical mystery. All right, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, thank you so much.
You got it, Aaron. Thank you.
You can hear the smoke alarm sounding off inside Delta Flight 2028, the cabin filling up with smoke fast.
I was so scared. I started to scream.
The FAA says more than an hour after takeoff from Fort Lauderdale, the crew reported smoke in the cockpit and a problem with one of the jet's two engines.
I started noticing at a certain point a mist coming through, and then I realized the mist coming through the cabin was smoke. I could smell the smoke. Then I looked back toward the rear of the plane, and it was dark.
All 89 passengers were told to put their heads between their legs to limit the amount of smoke they inhaled.
You have to take something and oh my God, all the eyes burning.
People were coughing, some people were crying.
The flight to New York immediately diverted to Charleston, the pilot telling passengers what went wrong.
Apparently there was some malfunction in the engine, and it had something to do with oil being burned. And they were deciding to turn one of the engines off to avoid the extra smoke.
The smoke clearing in 5 minutes, and all the passengers are now back in New York, safe and sound this morning.
I'm not religious, but I clenched my fist and I said, okay, God, I'm with you now. Get us down, please. And I promise to be a good boy.
Top story this morning. Parts of the southern and central plains states brace for more severe weather today. Violent storms, some with tornadoes and hail, struck North Texas and Oklahoma on Friday. No major damage was reported. No reports of injuries either.
The worst weather today is expected in Oklahoma and Kansas. Don Champion is in Oklahoma City with the latest. Don, good morning.
Good morning, Vanita. This motel was destroyed by a tornado Wednesday night, but the cleanup effort here has been hampered by 3 straight days of severe weather. Last night, this area was pounded by hail and high winds. In Norman, Oklahoma, hail and wind at times caused near blinding conditions. Baseball-sized pellets even knocked out windows at a YMCA building. Crews worked overnight clearing broken glass. Part of the building also flooded during the storm. The severe thunderstorms marched across the Oklahoma City metro area during the evening rush. At one point, the wind flipped a tractor-trailer. Power lines in part of the area were also no match. To the east, in the town of Luther, lightning sparked a fire. Heavy rain caused bigger problems Friday evening, creating flash flooding. Several inches of rain fell in a matter of hours in some areas where the ground is already saturated from storms earlier in the week. Some drivers who tried getting through high water simply failed. To the south in Marshall, Texas, flooding was also a problem. The town got nearly 3 inches of rain Friday alone.
Tornado. Yep, tornado. Tornado.
At least 4 tornadoes were reported in the state. The Kavanaugh family in Wise County says one of them lifted their home off the ground, destroying it.
We don't have a home. Don't know where to go.
Now, the National Weather Service says about 20 million people could be impacted by the severe weather outbreak today. The threat is expected to move east tomorrow. Anthony?
Don Champion in Oklahoma City this morning. Thank you, Don.
The fire lasted 25 minutes and was quickly extinguished. The commission designated the incident as an unusual event, which is the lowest of 4 categories the agency gives to potential safety or security threats at nuclear plants. There is no information yet as to what caused the transformer failure.
In the U.S., thousands of people, mostly African-American mothers, have demonstrated in the capital, Washington, against police brutality. The rally was organized by mothers whose children have been killed at the hands of the police. The demonstrators demanded an end to racial injustice and a change in police practices. The rally comes in the wake of recent killings and mistreatment of unarmed African Americans by U.S. police. In the latest incident, 25-year-old Freddie Gray died in police custody after going through a severe spinal injury during his arrest in Baltimore. Gray's death sparked violent protests across the United States. Well, from Florida, I'm joined by Gaynor Cambon with the African People's Socialist Party. Welcome to the program. Ms. Cambon, demonstrations against police brutality and racial injustice are continuing across the U.S. This time, mothers of African Americans killed by the police organized the demonstration. In which way do you think the situation is heading?
Well, I think that we expect that there will be more police killing, that there will be more young men, young African men murdered in the streets in the United States. Because, you know, Africans exist as a colonized people in this country, and the police is the first arm of the state. It's there to protect the state, and it can't stop killing Africans because, as I said, Africans are, you know, oppressed in this country and always in a constant state of resisting that oppression. So that we expect that, you know, that it's not just a single situation happening anywhere, whether it's Ferguson or New York, in the case of Eric Gardner, but all across this country, we're going to see more African men, you know, being killed by the police. And it's not a question of whether or not, you know, there's body cameras or, you know, whether it's sensitivity training. None of that will work And the only thing that will be effective is, when African people take power and control over their own lives and become their own state, where we can begin to push back the oppressive state of the United States government.
And with pressure by the people rising by the day, how soon do you think we could see an overhaul of the police culture?
They're trying right now to say that they're overhauling the solutions that they've came up with, as you have seen, body cameras or sensitivity training, things like that. Police review boards review after they kill an African to review how and why they kill the African. But again, like I said before, none of that is working and none of it will work. This is not just, this didn't just get started. It used to be, maybe a couple of months ago, every 28 hours, a young African man was killed in this country by white police. Now it's every 18 hours, as I'm told. So, it's escalating. So, I don't think that the police department, I don't think they can do any better. I just stated that I don't think that it's a question of, whether the police were going to be reformed or whatever. The police is there to protect the state, against who? The oppressed entity, the oppressed and colonized people, which are Africans, Mexicans, and people like that who are oppressed in this country.
All right, Guy Cambon with the African People's Socialist Party from Florida. Thanks for your time there, man.
In the Philippines, thousands of passengers are stranded at airports and seaports because the country is preparing for a powerful typhoon. Typhoon Nul is expected to make landfall within a few hours, bringing with it torrential rain and wind speeds of up to 160 kilometres an hour. The country's Social Welfare Department is organising the distribution of relief goods. The Philippine Coast Guard has suspended ferry services and prohibited fishing in the coastal areas affected. Heavy rains and strong winds flattened houses and knocked out power in coastal areas about 400 kilometres north of the capital, Manila. 2 people were killed and more than 3,000 residents were forced to move to shelters. Some residents started returning home early on Monday when the rain stopped. Despite the destruction, Nul also brought much-needed precipitation to rice and corn farms that had been hit by prolonged, intense heat. The weather system is weakening as it continues tracking north towards the province of Batanes, the northernmost island group in the country. Wind speeds are still up to 160 kilometres an hour. Storm surges of up to 1.5 metres are possible along its path.
Well, Kate, we were waiting for it to happen, and it just did. We've got landfall.
Yeah, we have an official word now. Just right between Myrtle Beach and North Myrtle Beach is where we had landfall of Tropical Storm Ana. Right there by the outlets, if you're aware where that is, the Tanger outlets there, that's where we had the landfall of the system.
Absolutely. So, even though it makes its way onshore, it is expected to weaken a bit, but you still have many of the threats that we were talking about. Rip currents are still going to be a big deal. When these things come onshore, it's not unusual to have have tornadoes. Usually they're weak, they don't last that long, but they can occur. Also, flooding inland, that could occur in low-lying spots, places with poor drainage.
Well, if you think about it, this thing already has spin to it. You get rain bands like this, they move on shore, they're going to have some natural rotation to them. So to get some small little tornadoes, that is something that we see happen. Flood concerns also, because as you watch these moves from south to north, you can see that they're kind of training like train cars on a train track.
They certainly do. You're right about
area,
that.
And that's where we get that flood.